A few months after divorcing my cheating wife, she emailed me with the subject line, "The truth," and it left me speechless. Hey Reddit. When I finalized my divorce from Emily, I thought I was finally free. The betrayal had been more than I could bear. I had spent a decade of my life building a life with her, only to discover she was sneaking around with someone else, a guy I once considered a friend, no less. The discovery was devastating, but in hindsight, it felt like a liberation. The months following the divorce were a whirlwind of mixed emotions. Anger, relief, sadness, and hope all rolled into a confusing storm. I threw myself into work, joined a gym, and started picking up hobbies I had long abandoned. It wasn't easy, but I was slowly rebuilding myself. I even started going out more, meeting new people, and focusing on my happiness. Then one random Thursday morning, I was sipping coffee and sifting through emails when I saw it. Her name popped up in my inbox like a ghost from the past. The subject line simply read, "The truth." My heart stopped. I hadn't spoken to Emily since the divorce was finalized. We had no reason to. We didn't have kids, and our separation had been as clean as it could be given the circumstances. But now, there it was, an email that felt like it was pulsating on my screen. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. What could she possibly want? Curiosity and anxiety gnawed at me as I debated whether to open it. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on, but the other part, the part that still sought closure, needed to know what she had to say. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The email was long. "Hi David, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I had to write it. There are things I need to say, things I need to explain. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I owe you the truth about everything." I couldn't read past that point without feeling a surge of anger. What truth? What could she possibly say now that would change anything? But as much as I wanted to slam my laptop shut, I couldn't stop reading. The affair was real, she admitted. She confirmed everything I already knew, that she had been seeing Jake behind my back for nearly a year. But then she dropped a bombshell that made my blood run cold. What you don't know is that it wasn't just Jake. There was someone else. Someone you never found out about. And this is where it gets complicated. I need you to hear me out. Someone else? My mind raced. How many lies had she hidden? Emily went on to explain that the second affair had been brief and that it had happened in a moment of weakness when she and I were going through a rough patch. She claimed it meant nothing and that she had ended it quickly. But the consequences of that decision were what she had been carrying with her ever since. "David, I think the child might not be Jake's." The words seemed to leap off the screen. "A child? What child?" I reread the sentence several times, convinced I had misunderstood. Emily and I had never talked about kids during our marriage. She always said she wasn't ready, and I had respected that. So why was she suddenly mentioning a child? Then I remembered. Just before our divorce, I had heard through mutual friends that Jake and Emily had announced they were expecting a baby. I had dismissed it at the time, telling myself it was no longer my concern. But now, as I sat there staring at her email, the pieces started to click. She wasn't just saying the child might not be Jake's. She was implying it might be mine. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My head spun with questions. If there was even a chance this child was mine, why was she only telling me now? Did Jake know? Did anyone else? And what was I supposed to do with this information? Emily ended the email by saying she wanted to meet in person to explain everything. She said she had been wrestling with guilt for months and that she couldn't keep the secret any longer. She wanted to give me the opportunity to know the truth and decide how I wanted to proceed. I slammed the laptop shut and paced around my apartment, my thoughts a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to ignore her and let her deal with the mess she had created. But another part, the part that still cared, despite everything, felt a responsibility to at least hear her out. Over the next few days, I wrestled with what to do. I avoided replying to her email, but the questions haunted me. If the child was mine, did I have a right to know? Did the child have a right to know me? What kind of man would I be if I turned my back on the possibility? Finally, after nearly a week of sleepless nights, I decided to meet her. I sent a curt reply agreeing to her request, and we arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I walked in and saw her sitting at a corner table, my heart was a storm of emotions. She looked different, tired, anxious, and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. As I sat down, she gave me a weak smile and said, "Thank you for coming." For the next hour, she poured her heart out. She told me everything about her affair with Jake, how it had started, and how it had spiraled out of control. She admitted that she had been selfish and reckless and that she had no excuse for her actions. Then she revealed that during the same period, she had a one-night stand with someone else, a coworker whose name she refused to share. She said she hadn't realized she was pregnant until after we had already separated. At the time, she assumed the baby was Jake's and had told him as much. But as the months went by, doubts began to creep in. The timeline didn't add up perfectly, and something in her gut told her she needed to be honest with me. I sat there in stunned silence, barely able to process everything she was saying. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since I read her email. Why now? Why are you telling me this now? She looked down at her hands and said, because I can't live with the guilt anymore. And because I think you deserve to know if you have a child out there. The weight of her words hung in the air between us. I didn't know what to say or how to feel. My anger, sadness, and confusion all blurred together into a single overwhelming emotion. Before I could respond, she pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. It's a paternity test kit, she said quietly. I thought it would be best to get answers before we make any decisions. I stared at the envelope, my mind racing. This was the moment of truth, or at least the first step toward it. I didn't know if I was ready for what might come next, but I knew I couldn't walk away now. As I walked out of the cafe with the envelope in hand, I realized my life was about to change again. Whether or not the child was mine, I was now entangled in a situation I never saw coming. Little did I know, the email was just the beginning. The real truth was far more complicated than I could have ever imagined. There is more to this story. Stay tuned for the part 2.